Hello, I'm Michael Orwig, and welcome once again to the Wizard's Chest. With me today is a friend of mine from Toastmasters, Mark Seevers. Mark has a very interesting story. He's an excellent speaker. What level of black belt are you?
First degree black belt.
Just a first?
Just
But you're a
first.
national champion, right?
I was national champion back in '86. I did that as a blue belt and then again as a brown belt.
Okay, so you were competing by class
Correct.
back then.
Yes.
Okay. And currently you're working as a
A surgical assistant.
surgical assistant. The story that Mark has is, in my opinion, both inspirational and also, unfortunately, all too common as far as the difficulties growing up with our education system and labeling and other things. And I just wanted to share your story with everybody, and thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you.
Cool. So let's start back perhaps a little bit with early childhood in your family. Anything particular there growing up?
Well, growing up, neither one of my parents had anything over a high school education. My dad had an 8th grade education, and then he was pulled to actually pick cotton for his family. They were extremely poor. And so education really wasn't a big thing in our family. And one of the things that I ended up with was dyslexia, but back then they didn't know what dyslexia was. So I always had a hard time reading. And even today, a book that would take you a couple hours will take me at least a month to read. Yeah.
What have you done to over the years to help improve the dyslexia? Anything or?
Well, just more reading. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until about 2011 I started working with a surgeon. He one day asked me, what books have you read lately? I'm like, I haven't read a book probably 15 years. So he conned me into reading a book, and I loved it. And from there, and again, it took me forever, but I just started reading more. I started writing down words that I was having troubles with. And some were just pronunciations. Others was because I could tell that letters were being flipped, but I couldn't tell how they were being flipped. So if it was IE, in my mind I still see IE, but for some reason it looks like it says EI. And so I know that's not right. And so it takes me a long time to kind of figure that out. And sometimes I can figure it out right away. Sometimes I'm thinking, okay, this word isn't right. What's not right about it? And then I figure out, oh yeah, it's the switching of 2 letters that's throwing me off.
And for someone that doesn't have dyslexia, it's hard for us to put myself in your shoes to even recognize. There are some things that you may consider. My good friend Gisela Hoffman, I did an interview with her and Dave Smith. Their technology actually helps rewire the brain and is good for dyslexia. It helps kids with autism, but may be something that I can connect you guys with if you'd like to take a look at. But my daughter's got a touch of dyslexia, same type thing. It takes her forever in languages and things like that to sort things out.
Right.
It can be done. It just takes more time. And unfortunately, our school system is set up at such a level that to them, if you're fast at something, it means you're smart.
Right.
And no, that's not the case. And dyslexia certainly is a part of that. It's a wiring within the mind and how the brain's working within that. But so one way or another, were you ever diagnosed with dyslexia through all of your school years, or was this?
No, actually, I wasn't diagnosed until my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
So going back to grade school, I was in special education for reading. Obviously, I wasn't reading, and therefore It wasn't a dyslexia kind of problem. It was you're just not smart kind of problem. And so they would take a bunch of us that couldn't read, probably like 5 or 6 of us, and they would put us in a room with a special ed teacher. We would either, play games and read little, I don't want to say scriptures, but just little paragraphs that they would give us to read and see how if we have troubles pronouncing those things. And so from there, I moved on into junior high. And junior high, I had an English teacher for 2 years who absolutely did not like me for the simple fact that I couldn't spell. For me, I couldn't spell. If I couldn't read it correctly, I was having a hard time spelling it correctly. And so spelling was a very hard thing for me. And luckily for me, I had a good friend who was extremely smart. And instead of treating me like I was a dummy, he kind of took me on as a project, like, hey, I don't think you're stupid. I think that I can help you. And I remember I would get D's on tests, and I'd be disappointed, and he'd be like, man, you passed. And he'd be so excited for me. And if it wasn't for him helping me through junior high, I'm not sure how long it would have taken me, to be honest. But the teacher would always degrade me, and she would do it in front of the class. She handed out, in my speech that I gave, she handed out a test one day, and she told me, just put your name on there and hand it back in to me. And I'm like, why? She goes, well, you and I both know you're not going to pass, so just hand it back in. And it was just things like that.
Not exactly teacher of the year material.
Exactly, right. So then by the time I got into high school, I was pretty good at talking to people, so I was actually able to talk people into writing essays for me. I didn't know how to write. I couldn't spell. I couldn't read well enough to do the research in time to be able to put it together and then submit it. And so I actually got carried through, which again is not something that's good, but that's how I got through. And once I got to college, we took a class, an English class, and they started talking about speed reading. And that's how they come to find out that I had dyslexia. And by that time, it was starting to become more noticeable and understanding that, hey, you may not be dumb. It may be that you actually have something wrong with you that, makes you not able to read this. And now we need to figure out how we can correct that.
How'd you get through college?
Well, I didn't. I actually went to college in 3 different places, and I failed every single class, or every single semester. But what happened is I went so at age 30, I found myself working in a restaurant, which I found kind of ironic because when I was 18 and working in a restaurant, I was making fun of this guy who was 32 and working in the restaurant. Oh my gosh, I can't, what kind of life does he have? He's 32 years old and he's working in a restaurant. And now I'm that person. But what I started thinking about was there's got to be something I can do because this isn't it. And I know it's not it. I could feel it. And then I started thinking, I'm really good with my hands. I had my black belt by then, by the time I moved out here in 86. I'm really good with my hands. I'm good with my feet. I can take instruction and I know how to apply it and put it together. So what job is out there that I can do that? And you've talked about it quite a bit in Toastmasters. When you start visualizing, it starts to appear. And so I started thinking about it quite a bit. I was working at the fire department, and I started.
You were a fireman, or
I was a volunteer fireman.
You're volunteer, okay.
Yeah, out in Frederick, Colorado, and I started riding with the ambulance service because the biggest fire we put out was a brush fire, and that was usually done by foot. We stomp it out, and we were done. So I started running with the ambulance, and we were dropping people off at the hospital, and I started wondering, what happens from here? I mean, this person's going to have surgery. What's involved with that? about a week later, after I started thinking about that a lot, I came home one night. It was about, I don't know, 11 o'clock, midnight. Turned on the TV, and the first thing on the TV was become a surgical assistant working in the operating room. And I'm like, that's it. So I went to check it out. I just want to know what was involved, because if it's a lot of reading, it's not for me. But what I found is that it wasn't a whole lot of reading. It was a whole lot of hands-on. And from hands-on, that's how I learn. So most people can learn from a book, and they can read it and they understand it. Me, I learn by doing and seeing, and then from there, I'm good to go.
But you see, that's a huge point. How do we teach in school? Most of the time, we teach verbally in a very left brain style.
Right.
A lot of people are very kinesthetic. I'm very kinesthetic in my flying career. But yet I've got manuals that have 7,000 pages worth of reading I've got to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to read technical material, no. But if I can be much more hands-on with the material, whether it's in a simulator or a cockpit trainer of some kind or whatever, I do much, much better. But just trying to read strictly technical data, no. I mean, just... we learn in different styles, and you happen to find a niche that matched up with one of your skill sets.
Correct. One of the things that when I was a volunteer firefighter, we were becoming EMTs, and of course we had to study and train for those, and then we had to take a test. Well, out of 7 people, I'm the only one who failed the test, and they couldn't understand it. It was like, you know your stuff. We don't understand why you failed the test. And I said, I've never been able to really pass a test. It's just so hard for me.
So was it testitis, i.e. a condition response from so many years of the dyslexia not ever passing a test and then assuming you're not going to pass it? Or was there something inherent within that style of test that they were giving you?
Well, I think it was a little bit of both, because what happened was one lady said, you know what, why don't we try something different? We're going to come up with this second test, and I'm going to read the test to you, and then I'll read you the multiple choice answers, and then you have to choose it.
So in essence, an oral test, yeah.
Yeah. I passed with a 95% from the oral test. And so from that point on, I was like, wow, that's interesting. I've never had that done. No teacher's ever said, well, hey, how about if I read this to you and then you answer you write down what you think your answer is. So for schools, I think that if you took the time and did that for some of these children, you may find that these kids know more than what the test is telling the teachers that they know.